Published 2202 EDT, the 31st of August 2017. Updated 2302 EDT, the 31st of August 2017. The mayor of Houston has said the flooded city has turned a corner after electricity was restored to much of the area and shelter numbers were beginning to decline as of Thursday night. Mayor Sylvester Turner declared in a press conference that Houston is open for business, adding that large areas were drying out well and traffic was returning to the streets. Flood waters have receded enough for the recovery mission to begin, and the death toll is expected to rise past its current count of 39 when most of the water is gone from Houston and Harris County by Friday or early Saturday, as residents wade through the declining murky waters to salvage what is left of their homes. Experts warn that it has millions of contaminants, including toxic chemicals, sewage, debris and waste. More than 100,000 homes were destroyed when Harvey slammed into the Lone Star State last Friday night, and some cities are left without water as the storm continues to dump record-setting amounts of rain. After touring the devastated Texas Gulf Coast on Thursday, Vice President Mike Pence said more than 300,000 people have applied for disaster aid as the region begins to put the pieces of their lives back together. Scroll down for videos. Houston has turned a corner, the mayor said on Thursday night. Power to much of the city has been restored and flood waters have receded, with officials claiming most of the water should be gone by Friday night or Saturday morning. More than 100,000 homes were destroyed when Harvey slammed into the Lone Star State last Friday night. Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner declared in a press conference that Houston is open for business, adding that large areas were drying out well and traffic was returning to the streets. More than 300,000 people have applied for disaster aid as the region begins to put the pieces of their lives back together as residents wade through the declining murky waters to salvage what is left of their homes. Experts warn that it has millions of contaminants, including toxic chemicals, sewage, debris and waste. Experts are warning people to stay clear of the dirty water, citing its numerous hazards. They advise people not to play in the water and to wash themselves right after coming into contact with it. People have begun to empty out of shelters in the city, returning home and starting to rebuild their lives. Hurricane Harvey flood victims are being urged to file their insurance claims by Friday before Texas enacts a bill that will result in companies paying out less for damages. Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed a bill on May 27 that reduces the penalty interest rate for insurance companies. The law covers lawsuits that have weather-related damages, including hurricanes but not flooding. The rate would drop from 18% to 10%, meaning policyholders could lose out on money if they were to sue over claims. People are being urged to file before Friday, when the law is activated. Speaking at a press conference on Thursday night, Turner said he expects to move people from the Toyota Center downtown to the nearby George R. Brown Convention Center on Friday. The convention center, which once housed 10,000 people at one point, sheltered about 8,000 late Thursday. Officials were also optimistic about the heavily flooded city, expecting the waters to be gone from most of Houston and Harris County by late Friday or early Saturday. The city is beginning to recover from the catastrophic storm with just 37,000 left without power, down by Wednesday's number of 75,000. Houston has a customer base of around 2.4 million. As residents begin to return to their homes to assess damage, experts are warning people to stay clear of the dirty water, citing its numerous hazards. Porfirio Villarreal, a spokesman for the Houston Health Department, said to the New York Times, "We're telling people to avoid the floodwater as much as possible. Don't let your children play in it. And if you do touch it, wash it off. Remember, this is going to go on for weeks." Vice President Mike Pence announced that Trump and Melania would be returning to Texas on Saturday, after the president received flack for failing to meet with Hurricane Harvey victims and later claiming he saw wrath of the storm firsthand when he went on Tuesday. In his speech on Thursday, Pence commended state and federal officials who aided the relief effort before proclaiming his admiration of citizen volunteers and encouraged all Americans to find a way to help. The vice president also revealed that more than 300,000 people affected by the storm have already registered for disaster aid and said that Trump's administration expects Congress to move quickly in funding legislation. Alejandro Castillo takes a break from carrying water-soaked items out of her family's home after Hurricane Harvey flood waters receded in Houston. Lucy Liu dumps trash on a pile of debris as she helps her coworker clean out her flood-damaged house in Houston. Tiana Oliver pauses while helping a crew of volunteers from her work tear out drywall in her flood-damaged house Thursday. Some areas in Houston have seen waters recede enough to try and salvage items from homes. Pictured Edward Casanova carries a chair as he helps dry out items from a friend's house on Thursday in Houston. John Rose pauses while salvaging items from his flood-damaged house, although some homes are still partially underwater. Houses in Port Arthur, Texas, on Thursday morning. With the rain finally over in Houston and other parts of Texas and the floodwaters now receding, recovery missions can start. A satellite image shows Harvey moving away from Texas and towards Mississippi and Tennessee and other states. Texan firefighters were going door to door in a grim search for survivors and victims of Hurricane Harvey as hospitals and homes that were the last to be hit are evacuated on Thursday morning. Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo said previously that he feared how many bodies his officers would find. His bleak outlook was echoed by Fire Department Chief Terry Garrison at a press conference late on Tuesday night. As emergency crews switched their efforts from rescue to recovery mode on Thursday, the military faced harsh criticism for how it has handled the catastrophe, which has been described as a 1,000-year flood. Former Joint Task Force Katrina Commander Russell Honore likened the response to amateur and blasted the government for not having a better plan. Harvey has almost cleared out of Texas and is making its way over Louisiana in a less severe form of a tropical depression. By Friday night, it will creep up in a northwest diagonal direction over Mississippi, Tennessee and Kentucky, bringing heavy not life-threatening rain. But just as the panic seemed to die down on Thursday, sudden floods caused by burst rivers in Beaumont triggered the evacuations of medical centers, and the failure of water plants meant that hospitals filled with patients were suddenly not fit for use. 200 patients were removed from the Baptist Beaumont Hospital on Thursday after its water failed. Elderly patients from the Gulf Medical Center were also transported to other facilities in wheelchairs and on gurneys. As of Thursday night, the death toll is 39 and is expected to rise quickly as crews switched their efforts from rescue to recovery mission. Harvey has been downgraded to a tropical depression and moved out of Texas after 6 days of torrential rain. It will bring heavy rain through Mississippi, Tennessee and parts of Kentucky before finally tailing off on Friday. 100 homes have been destroyed by the storm and more damage will reveal itself as the waters recede. Some people in Houston returned home to find their houses ruined, while others, expecting to discover them in pieces, cry tears of joy after finding them intact. The entire city of Beaumont is without running water due to failed water plants, forcing the evacuation of hospitals. An explosion at a chemical plant in Houston leaked toxic substances into the air, and water rescue efforts continue in parts of southeast Texas and Louisiana. More towns are still being evacuated, including Sweeney and neighborhoods near the Addicks Reservoir. A man stands in his flooded home in a West Houston neighborhood in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey on Thursday. Volunteer rescuer Matt Clark searches for local residents after a mandatory evacuation was ordered in the area beneath the Barker Reservoir as water is released. After Hurricane Harvey caused widespread flooding in Houston, a home in West Houston is marked with an X to indicate that it has been checked and cleared for flood victims. Water swamps Port Arthur, Texas, where thousands were impacted by the wrath of Hurricane Harvey earlier in the week. Houses in Port Arthur, Texas, on Thursday morning. The true devastation of Hurricane Harvey unfolded on Wednesday as emergency crews began the grisly mission of recovering bodies from homes and flood water. A house in Orange, Texas, on Thursday where flood waters continue to swallow up homes after Hurricane Harvey. Houston Fire Chief Terry Garrison said on Wednesday night that the department's focus was now on finding the bodies of the dead. We're to start transitioning from a rescue mode to recovery operations. We're going to begin what we call a wide area search in the areas that have been most heavily impacted. We'll be doing a block-by-block, door-by-door search of structures which we believe have had 3 feet or greater of water in it to ensure that there are no people that we have left behind. Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo previously said he was worried about how many bodies his force would find. The realistic death toll will emerge over the coming weeks and months. As Houston prepared to face the hurricane's grisly aftermath, there was still imminent danger and panic in other parts of Texas and the Gulf Coast. In East Texas, the entire city of Beaumont is now without running water. Residents in some parts of Tyler County, which has a population of around 20,000 which sits to the north of the city, were told to get out or die on Wednesday night as rivers overflowed, triggering yet more floods. Anyone who chose to stay behind was told to write their social security number on their arm so that emergency services would later be able to identify their body. There was also fresh danger in Harris County and Houston after 2 explosions at a chemical plant. 15 police officers were taken to hospital for treatment after being exposed to the harmful substances which were released from Arkema Inc. plant as a result of the blasts. In Houston alone, the fire department has received 15,000 calls for help since Harvey made landfall. Some areas of the city continue to be at risk as water from the Addicks and Barker reservoirs is released, causing the flood level in areas nearby to rise. On Thursday, 40 survivors were rescued from flood water in the city. The emergency services have rescued 3,500 in total since Harvey began. There was harsh criticism of the military over its response to the tragedy from Honore, who said of the Northern Command, the division tasked with overseeing state, something is significantly wrong without control and command. There comes a point in time with the mission that it is too big for the state National Guard and they need to get the hell over it and bring in the big dogs when you've got a big mission, he said, in a jibe at President Trump, who has repeatedly congratulated local efforts to address the catastrophe. He went on, they need to stop patting each other on the back while these poor people are out here waiting to be rescued. Firefighters in Houston are working 48-hour shifts to recover victims, and police officers for the city are not being allowed to go home until the demand for their time is under control. Local residents evacuate after a mandatory evacuation order in the area beneath the Barker Reservoir as water is released after Hurricane Harvey caused widespread flooding in Houston. Residents in some parts of Tyler County, which has a population of around 20,000, which sits to the north of the city, were told to get out or die on Wednesday night as rivers overflowed, triggering yet more floods. Pictured residents who live near the Barker Reservoir evacuating. Light rain will continue in parts of Louisiana, all of Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia and South Carolina. There will be heavier rain in parts of Tennessee, northern Mississippi and a small pocket of Arkansas until Friday, but the rainfall will come nowhere close to measuring the 51 inches which fell in Texas over the weekend. And earlier in the week, elderly patients were suddenly evacuated out of the Gulf Health Center in Port Arthur on Wednesday as flood waters through it. An elderly patient waits to be removed from the Gulf Medical Center in Port Arthur on Wednesday as flood water rises. A rescuer removes an elderly patient from the Gulf Medical Center in Port Arthur on Wednesday. Rescuers evacuate elderly patients from the Gulf Healthcare Center in Port Arthur on Wednesday. Boats move through Highway 96 in Beaumont, Texas, on Thursday looking for anyone in need of rescue. A rescue worker emerges from a Houston home right triumphantly holding a goldfish bowl on Thursday. Tanya Sutherland tries to save her injured calf by rolling it along the grass with a barrel in Winnie, Texas. A man helps cows escape from flood water in Winnie, Texas, on Thursday after Hurricane Harvey. A truck underwater in Houston, Texas, on Thursday, where floods continued to surge in parts due to the controlled release of water from two overspilling dams. Residents in Port Arthur, Texas, examined the floodwater outside their home on Thursday. The swampy Interstate 10 on Thursday in Vidor, Texas, where high-water vehicles tow boats past underwater houses. Firefighters in Houston are working 48-hour shifts to recover victims, and police officers for the city are not being allowed to go home until the demand for their time is under control. Most of our crews are on duty. They have been working non-stop, 48-hour shifts, Chief Garrison said on Wednesday. When they need downtime, we're sending them to cots to rest. We have kept them working and they will continue to do that. Houston Police Department ASST Chief Larry Satterwhite added, in Beaumont, recovery efforts are still a long way off as emergency services frantically work on rescuing people from the rising waters. On Tuesday night, the Neches River level rose to a terrifying 82 feet. It prompted a sudden and dramatic warning from the Tyler County Emergency Department, which said in a late-night Facebook post, the loss of life and property is certain. Get out. Or deep town of Sweeney, which is home to around 3,700 people, is also being evacuated. Emergency crews will leave there on Friday, its mayor revealed ominously on Thursday. More water is expected to rush down on Houston from the Barker Reservoir, which is on the verge of overflowing. A mandatory evacuation order was issued late on Tuesday for people living near the dam. Many at-risk neighborhoods in its periphery have already been abandoned, despite the fact that Harvey has been downgraded from a tropical storm to a tropical depression. The National Hurricane Center warned of continuing flooding in parts of southeast Texas and southwest Louisiana. There were fresh warnings for opportunistic criminals on Thursday who hope to capitalize from the devastation of Hurricane Harvey. Loot and you will be shot. As the humanitarian crisis of the storm unfolds and Good Samaritans rush to help, a handful of evil businesses and individuals have tried to take advantage. Looting is a concern, but only 4 arrests have been made for it. The mayor of Houston has implemented a midnight to 5 a.m. curfew to curtail it. Texan business owners are enforcing their own preventative measures. At the Little York Food Mart in Houston, a former law enforcement officer is standing guard with a shotgun. In a videotaped message for looters, he warned, "I am not afraid to shoot you." There were signs warning looters will be shot outside homes near the Barker Reservoir too. The Attorney General has so far received more than 700 complaints for price gouging, an illegal act which Governor Greg Abbott condemned as reprehensible and un-Texan on Wednesday. Among culprits was Best Buy, which was caught selling packets of water for $42 earlier in the week. They have since apologized. Two explosions at the Arkema Inc. chemical plant in Crosby, Texas, have released harmful substances into the air and water. There were two explosions at the Arkema Inc. chemical plant in Houston on Thursday morning as a result of the floods. Rescues are still ongoing in some parts of Texas, including Buffalo Bayou in Houston, one of the first places to be severely flooded, left in Port Arthur, right, which was devastated on Tuesday. A Houston mansion sits in floodwater after being swamped by Hurricane Harvey. The cost of the damage, which includes 500,000 ruined cars, is likely to total $160 billion. Even evacuation shelters in parts of the state were not safe from the chaos. Water rushed through the Bob Bowers Civic Center in Port Arthur on Tuesday, where scores of evacuees were taking shelter. After his tour of Corpus Christi on Thursday, Vice President Mike Pence said that already more than 300,000 people have registered for disaster aid, adding that the Trump administration expects Congress to move quickly in funding legislation. He said, "We expect Congress to move quickly on the initial legislation and will be working very diligently in the opening weeks of Congress to accomplish that." Harvey has brought the heaviest rainfall in U.S. history, soaking Texas with more than 51 inches since it first made landfall last Friday. It will move on and into Mississippi, Tennessee and Kentucky, bringing with it heavy not life-threatening rain. Life-threatening flooding is still a concern in pockets of southeast Texas. Other dangers were caused on Thursday by a fire at a chemical plant which released harmful substances into the air and water. The explosions at Arkema Inc. sent 15 police officers to the hospital. 8 were released shortly afterwards. Many people are still in urgent need of rescue in Beaumont, Lake Charles and Port Arthur, as rescue teams and volunteers continue rescuing stranded residents from the waters. National Guardsmen and women have been brought back from overseas deployment to help with the disaster. On Wednesday, former Joint Task Force Katrina Commander Russell L. Honore made the following remarks to CNN's Aaron Burnett in a scathing condemnation of the U.S. military response to Hurricane Harvey. He has been inundated with gratitude and praise by people in Texas who say his assessment is spot on. Night is coming and it is going to get worse before it gets better. We have a lot of citizens that are hanging by the thread of their lives. 2 years ago today I arrived in New Orleans post-Katrina. We did an extensive study on readjust how we were going to do business. We put a lot of emphasis on the states being the first responders. The problem is we have 50 different solutions. Decision not to evacuate it will be proven wrong because that is not the doctrine of Homeland Security. You take actions to protect people. We put a lot of money in these state, parish and county control so they can be predictive. You don't have to evacuate 6 million people. You evacuate the elderly and the disabled. You evacuate the people in areas that were previously flooded and you allow people to voluntarily evacuate. This is a bankrupt problem. He has been warning people to evacuate for days. I hope the guy in Miami and Tampa is not listening and thinking this is a success because it is not. Last week I wrote a Twitter saying this whole operation didn't have scale. Comparison to Katrina. In Katrina we had 40,000 National Guard, 240 helicopters in the first 4 days. They just got 100 helicopters in Texas. This is a lot bigger. I went out in a boat this morning and this is huge. After Katrina, the air elements and components of the Northern Command created a significant grid system for search and rescue. I don't know where that is. Doesn't look like anyone in Texas read that plan. Problems at the top. Something is significantly wrong with our command and control and they need to stop patting each other on the back while these poor people are out here waiting to be rescued. You gotta come in big and be there right at the edge of the storm so that you can come in and rescue people. The federal government took their hand off it. They went off to fight terrorism and each time we have a Sandy, or now a Harvey, the solution is different. It's put by the local state. They don't evacuate, they don't preposition troops. The American people have put too much confidence in us. We have been too successful overseas to come out in amateur hour and incrementally deploy the force. I'm sounding critical, but if we don't talk about this now, cause the Congress thought we fixed this. Fifth Army got the mission to supervise Army response to civil authorities under Northern Command, a command you never hear of. There comes a point in time with the mission that it is too big for the state National Guard and they need to get the hell over it and bring in the big dogs when you've got a big mission. A woman and her dog are pushed through the floodwater by 2 men in Port Arthur on Thursday. On Wednesday, police in Houston churned through floodwater looking for victims. The death toll will rise significantly from 38 as they continue their recovery mission. Planes are surrounded by floodwaters caused by Tropical Storm Harvey at the West Houston Airport in Texas. The U.S. Coast Guard responds to search and rescue requests after Hurricane Harvey in the Beaumont on Wednesday. The Coast Guard is working closely with all federal, state and local emergency operations centers and has established incident command posts to manage search and rescue operations while the rain might be clean. What it dredges up from the sewers and around the area is not. Floodwater can contain harmful sewage, chemicals and waterborne germs that can cause infections and diseases for people. People in Texas could in turn get viruses from ingesting the water or food that has been in contact with the floodwater, which would cause symptoms such as diarrhea and vomiting. Use of hand sanitizers and purified water at shelters is recommended by officials. Objects that have been submerged in water can also cause infection if touched or used after. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommends parents to throw out toys for children that were in the rainwater unless they are thoroughly cleaned. Trench food which causes skin to itch, swell up, blister and peel off is also possible after extended exposure to dirty water. Floodwater can be dangerous for people with open wounds, particularly if they have other health conditions. Sharp objects hidden in the water could create cuts that then become filled with waterborne bacteria, causing infections. And the harmful bacteria dredged up from the sewers and other unsanitary locations could require strong antibiotics than usual. People with open wounds are advised to keep them clean, wrapped and away from any of the dirty water. It's also advised that everyone get a tetanus shot, as glass, metal and other debris could lead to the life-threatening illness. The pools of stagnant, warm water left after the hurricane ends will be a perfect breeding ground for mosquitoes which can then spread infections. Zika and West Nile were among the diseases that saw increases in areas of Louisiana and Mississippi after Hurricane Katrina. Poor people are particularly at risk as they don't have the air conditioning and screens that can filter out the parasitic insects. Continuous use of insect repellent is recommended to avoid infection. The use of generators to power homes can lead to carbon monoxide poisoning. Experts warn. Mold is also a health hazard, the CDC warns, and all drywall and insulation tainted by floodwater or sewage should be removed from homes. Mattresses, pillows, carpeting, even stuffed toys should be tossed out. Hard surfaces can be disinfected with a solution of 1 cup of bleach to 5 gallons of water. If mold covers more than 100 square feet, a trained mold remover should be sat out. Experts say there are currently 14,000 troops mobilized in Texas and another 10,000 are on their way, Governor Abbott revealed on Wednesday. The troops already in Texas have conducted more than 8,500 rescues and more than 1,400 shelter-in-place checks, Abbott said. There are also 2 U.S. Navy warships being deployed to Texas to help with relief efforts. The Kearsarge, an amphibious assault ship, and the Oak Hill, a smaller dock landing ship, were being sent to support federal, state and local authorities' ongoing relief efforts in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey, according to the Navy. Abbott would not give an official death toll but praised volunteers and first responders for going above the call of duty to save lives. I am not amazed because we have seen this before, he said when asked for his response to the efforts of residents to help one another through the crisis. Texans really step up and protect and aid their fellow Texans. Whether you're a first responder, neighbor helping neighbor, stranger helping stranger, Texans have really stepped up. Mexico's Red Cross also sent an envoy of volunteers to storm devastated Houston on Wednesday, hours after Abbott said the state accepted an offer of aid from the Mexican government, including vehicles, boats, supplies and food. The support from Mexico's Red Cross, a non-government agency, is separate from the official aid offer. The convoy of 33 English-speaking volunteers left from Mexico City for Texas, where they plan to work in Houston shelters for 20 days before being replaced by a fresh crop of volunteers. Abbott said his state would accept the offer of assistance from neighboring Mexico. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson thanked Mexico's Foreign Minister Luis Videgaray, who was visiting Washington, for the offer of assistance. They've offered a wide range of assistance coordinating with the governor down in Texas and also through FEMA, but very generous of Mexico to offer their help at this very challenging time for our citizens down in Texas and now moving toward the border with Louisiana, said Tillerson. So thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. The flooding will take up to a week to disappear in Texas, he said, and the cleanup mission will take months. In Beaumont, 26 inches of rain have already fallen, and another 10 inches are due to fall before Harvey moves away and onto its next victim, Louisiana. Rescue operations are underway in southeast parts of the region with scores still trapped in their homes as water engulfs them. In Houston, the flood waters have begun to recede, but it will take days for them to entirely drain. Houston Fire Chief Samuel Pena says firefighters will begin searching neighborhoods in southwest Houston starting Thursday morning. Assistant Fire Chief Richard Mann says the searches are being done to ensure that no people were left behind. Floodwaters in many parts of Houston have receded while other neighborhoods are still dealing with rising waters from bayous and other swollen waterways. Man says the fire department will conduct these searches throughout the city. Officials expect the process to take 1 to 2 weeks to complete. Man says since Harvey inundated the Houston area, the fire department has received more than 15,000 calls for service. He says the volume of calls has stabilized and the fire department is working to transition from rescues calls to a recovery mode. Abbott also used the press conference to admonish businesses and opportunists who are taking advantage of the catastrophe with price gouging. Best Buy is among retailers under fire for hiking up prices as panic surges across Texas. It has apologized after photographs emerged of packs of water being sold for $42. Price gouging is not only reprehensible, it's illegal. It is un-Texan and we will not tolerate it. Almost 30,000 gallons of crude oil and about 8,500 gallons of wastewater spilled about 150 miles west of Houston because floodwaters from Harvey toppled 2 oil storage tanks, state officials said Wednesday. Burlington Resources Oil and Gas reported the spills in DeWitt County to the Texas Railroad Commission on Wednesday. They include a 16,170-gallon 385-barrel spill near the town of West Hoff and a 13,272-gallon 316-barrel spill west of Hochheim. It was not immediately clear if any of the spilled oil was recovered. Burlington Resources is a subsidiary of ConocoPhillips. Company representatives did not immediately respond to telephone and email messages seeking comment. More damage to oil industry infrastructure is expected to emerge as floodwaters recede. The entire city of Beaumont, which had a population of more than 110,000, is without running water because of the floods. Above, Barbara Nelson from Coastal Industrial and Specialty Gas Welding Supplies holds a sign outside her store to inform passers-by she had run out of bottled water. 2 volunteers set up extra cots at the NRG Stadium in Houston, Texas, on Thursday in preparation for more evacuees. There are 32,000 evacuees at shelters across Texas and an estimated 48,000 homes have been destroyed by the storm. Above, a man naps as a young girl next to him sits on a skee-ball machine at Max Bowl in Port Arthur. Evacuees rest on cots in a shelter at Woodcrest Church after their homes were damaged from rising floodwaters due to Tropical Storm Harvey on Wednesday in Lumberton, Texas. A man and woman pray as they find a spot together at the Max Bowl in Port Arthur, Texas. On Wednesday, a man sleeps on one of the bowling ball returns on Wednesday as evacuees continue to pour into the Max Bowl, which was converted to a shelter for those displaced by flooding in Port Arthur. Galen Phillips, 23, saved the lives of 50 people including babies and the sick who were stuck in Harvey floods after rescuers failed to show up to Port Arthur, Texas. A Good Samaritan saved the lives of 50 people including babies and the sick who were stuck in Harvey floods after rescuers failed to show up. Galen Phillips, 23, took matters into his own hands when he decided to step in and rescue members of his community in Port Arthur, Texas, after the storm caused extensive flooding where he lived. The music producer said he waited hours on his roof to flag down a rescue helicopter but was told his family wasn't a top priority at the moment, leaving him to be rescued by his uncle in a boat later that day. After realizing that emergency responders weren't saving people fast enough, he decided to go around and bring his neighbors to dry land. Speaking to The Sun, Phillips said people were ringing 911 and other departments and getting nowhere. When we went out on the boat I saw more volunteer rescues than official help. I'm talking about 9 to 1. We were all thinking, wow, why is it taking the officials so long to respond? They had said they were waiting until 6 a.m. to even come out and start rescuing people, but the flooding started about 121 am, so that was a long time to wait. My uncle and I rescued a good 50 people from our neighborhood. The streets around me had it worse than I've seen in the whole of Port Arthur. People were messaging me their address on Facebook asking to be rescued and I tried to get to as many as I could. There were people of all ages from month-old infants to children to adults and the elderly. We even had to carry people into the boat. There was one woman who had just had some kind of surgery to her stomach and she had no feeling in her legs, so we had to carry her into the boat and then carry her out of the boat to the U.S. Coast Guards. Despite continued reports of damage, Houston's 2 major airports reopened Wednesday on a limited basis, as floodwaters receded and the skies over the Texas city cleared with monster storm Harvey moving to the east. The 2 airports, George Bush Intercontinental and Hobby, were to resume operations at 4 p.m. after the runways and roads leading to the airport were cleared of water. No flights were imminent, but airport officials hoped airlines would quickly resume service. This is going to be a phased process, Houston Airport System spokesman Bill Begley told AFP, adding that domestic flights would resume first. We're focusing on this weekend, probably when we're going to see more and more flights at both airports. Thousands of flights have been canceled or delayed due to Harvey. About 800 passengers with connecting flights were stuck at the city's airports as Harvey made landfall over the weekend as a Category 4 hurricane. Evacuees ride on a truck after they were driven from their homes by the flooding from Hurricane Harvey on Wednesday in Port Arthur. A home in Port Arthur is surrounded by water after the flooding of Hurricane Harvey inundated the area. Trucks pass each other along Highway 90 after parts of the road were flooded by Hurricane Harvey on Wednesday in Port Arthur. Chris Wiley keeps an eye out for people needing help in Port Arthur, Texas. On Wednesday, evacuees are evacuated on a motorboat after being rescued in Port Arthur. On Wednesday, volunteers help handle a boat in a swift current during the rescue of people from their homes in Beaumont on Wednesday. Experts have said Hurricane Harvey has brought the most amount of rain than any other Atlantic hurricane. The hurricane dumped a staggering 24.5 trillion gallons of water on Texas and Louisiana, and an astonishing 51 inches of rain was recorded by a weather station in Houston, according to reports. The sheer amount of water in just a 5-day span has surpassed the amount of rain Miami, Boston and Seattle have seen since January 1, 2017, reported The Atlantic. On Sunday, after the natural disaster made landfall late on Friday night, the Weather Prediction Center said local rainfall amounts of 50 inches would exceed any previous Texas rainfall record. The breadth and intensity of this rainfall are beyond anything experienced before. Catastrophic flooding is now underway and expected to continue for days. Earlier reports claimed that the area would see around 30 inches of rain. Starting Sunday, air carriers evacuated most of those passengers out of the airports to Dallas, Chicago or Detroit, where they could be connected to flights to their ultimate destinations. Begley said fully reopening the airports was part of the city's effort to return to a sense of normalcy. It also signaled to airlines that it's time to get started, he said. I do believe that it shows that we're moving forward a little bit. Southwest Airlines announced that it planned to resume flights Saturday. On Wednesday, Joel Myers of AccuWeather warned that Harvey had surpassed all other storms in terms of destruction. This will be the worst natural disaster in American history. The economy is impacted. By the time its total destruction is completed, will approach $160 billion, which is similar to the combined effect of Hurricanes Katrina and Sandy, he told the New York Post. At a midday press conference, Governor Greg Abbott said the worst of the rain was not over in Beaumont and Port Arthur and said the disaster was worse than Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Sandy. When you consider the population, size, and square mile size of the area impacted both by the hurricane swath and the flooding, it's far larger than Katrina, far larger than Sandy. At the George R. Brown Convention Center in Houston, the city's main shelter, 10,000 are cramming into cots, chairs and on the floor. Among the places to open their doors to victims of Harvey's flooding is a bowling alley in the coastal Texas city of Port Arthur. MaxBowl general manager Jeff Tolliver says firefighters called Tuesday night to ask him to turn off the venue's alarm system. When he left around 2:30 a.m. Wednesday, there were 80 to 100 people sheltering there. By afternoon, there were more than 500, as well as 50 to 100 dogs and cats, a lizard and a monkey. He says the monkey was a little surprising, but that everyone is trying to help. The bowling alley's cafe is feeding people and others have been dropping off clothes, toiletries, water and other things. Tolliver and his wife left their flooded home to stay with friends. He says he moved to Texas from Michigan a year ago to get away from the snow, but ended up with rain instead. Jalen Welch, 10, carries her belongings out of the flood on Tram Road in Beaumont after being rescued from flooding on Wednesday. Volunteers help evacuate children from flooding in Beaumont on Wednesday. People walk along West Port Arthur Road in Beaumont, Texas toward a flooded neighborhood where their family members live after Tropical Storm Harvey on Wednesday. Children play in flood water in an apartment parking lot as a result of Tropical Storm Harvey in Port Arthur, Texas. Vehicles navigate through flood waters caused by Tropical Storm Harvey in Orange, Texas. On Thursday, homeowners suffering flood damage from Harvey are more likely to be on the hook for losses than victims of prior storms, a potentially crushing blow to personal finances in neighborhoods along the Gulf Coast. Insurance experts say only a small fraction of homeowners in Harvey's path of destruction have flood insurance. That means families with flooded basements, soaked furniture and water-damaged walls will have to dig deep into their pockets or take on more debt to fix up their homes. Some may be forced to sell, if they can, and leave their communities. All these people taken out in boats, they have a second problem: they have no insurance, said Robert Hunter, director of insurance at the Consumer Federation of America, who used to run a federal flood insurance program. Hunter estimates that total out-of-pocket costs for flooded homeowners could reach $28 billion, the largest in U.S. history. Hunter expects flood damage alone from the storm to cost at least $35 billion, about what Katrina cost. But in that 2005 hurricane, about half of flooded homes were covered by flood insurance. With Harvey, only 2 of 10 homeowners have coverage, Hunter estimates. NBA player Jonathan Simmons described how he was rescued from Hurricane Harvey's floods on Tuesday. NBA player Jonathan Simmons said he had to trek through water, ride on a boat and on the back of a dumpster truck to escape his condo in Houston due to flooding caused by Hurricane Harvey. The Magic guard described how he safely evacuated with several children in tow on Tuesday, after he survived off of ramen noodle packs for a day. Speaking to Magic's official website, Simmons said Saturday night it started raining about 8 o'clock, but we had gotten over there about 3 o'clock just to be safe. I had bought all of these air mattresses and covers and blankets, and food and water for everybody. We were good for 3 days, but my other friend's house had started getting flooded early, so he came there to the house too, so that gave us another 11 extra people and most of them were kids. We had to let the kids eat first, so most of the last 2 days it was kind of rough without food. There was at least 20 people in the house and probably 8 of them were kids. When I was little, my mom always kept the fridge full of stuff during hurricanes. This time, I ate a pack of ramen noodles and that's all for like a day and a half. When Simmons was rescued by a mutual friend, Houston-based rapper Trey the Truth, he said we still had to ride a boat, walk through muddy water and ride on the back of a dumpster truck for like 5 miles. It was crazy. I had to hold up my people and I had some kids with me. Most of the kids were old enough to walk, but one of them I had to carry with me. A lot of people want to help, so that's been nice. I want to do whatever I can to help out any way that I can when that's possible. Homeowners insurance typically covers just damage from winds, not floods. For that, you need separate coverage from the federally run National Flood Insurance Program. The insurance must be bought by homeowners with federally backed mortgages living in the most vulnerable areas, called special flood hazard zones. People in those areas and near them have complained for years that the premiums are too high, though they would be much higher still if not subsidized by the federal government. Much of the Houston area falls outside those most vulnerable zones, and many homeowners who aren't forced to have coverage have decided to do without. Now they are stuck because much of the damage in the nation's 4th largest city won't be covered by their homeowners insurance. Unlike Corpus Christi and Rockport, much of the Houston area was damaged by flooding, not winds. There's going to be a huge uninsured economic loss here, said Pete Mills, a senior vice president at the Mortgage Bankers Association. A couple are evacuated by boat from flood waters caused by Tropical Storm Harvey in Port Arthur, Texas. On Thursday, a group of people carry supplies through flood waters caused by Tropical Storm Harvey in Port Arthur, Texas. Mark Bowling keeps an eye out for people needing help in Port Arthur. On Wednesday, after the flooding of Hurricane Harvey inundated the area, evacuees make their way through the flood waters that surrounded part of the Max Bowl, which was converted to a shelter for those displaced by flooding in Port Arthur, Texas. On Wednesday, evacuees make their way to Max Bowl, which was converted to a shelter for those displaced by flooding from Tropical Storm Harvey in Port Arthur. A woman gets off a bus at the Max Bowl in Port Arthur, Texas, a bowling alley converted into a shelter as people are displaced from their homes because of flooding from Tropical Storm Harvey. Gas prices are surging in the wake of Hurricane Harvey and panicked drivers are making things worse. Gas prices are surging in the wake of Hurricane Harvey and panicked drivers are making things worse. Prices have seen a 10-cent jump in the aftermath of the storm, making the national average for a gallon now $2.45. According to the AAA, states in the southeast have had an even steeper hike, increasing by 17 cents in Georgia and by 20 cents in South Carolina. Experts forecast that the price will continue to rise another 5 cents, due to Texas shutting down several oil refineries because of massive flooding in the state. Tom Closa, chief oil analyst for the Oil Price Information Service, said to CNN there's a worry now that most of the Texas refineries could be compromised for weeks rather than days. And price hikes could be the least of people's worries, as some drivers in the Dallas-Fort Worth area rushed to their pumps to find lines and some stations out of fuel just ahead of the Labor Day weekend, reported the Dallas Morning News. Prices in North Texas have already reached over $3 a gallon, with one downtown Dallas pump advertising for $3.97 a gallon, according to the Associated Press. One gas station chain, Quick Trip, with 135 stations in the Metroplex, said the company is keeping about half of its locations without gas. Spokesman Mike Thornbrew said Quick Trip is going to designate certain stores in all quadrants of the Metroplex and make sure those particular stores will have gasoline. We have been through this in the Southeast Atlantic area. If we tried to keep every store full of gasoline, we'd have outages everywhere. Nobody knows the extent of the damage to the pipelines and refineries. They're underwater. To donate to the Red Cross Hurricane Harvey Relief Fund, click here or call 1-800-435-7669.